In the next two modules, we'll be looking at the 4 agents of erosion. We'll be looking at running water, wind, ice, and gravity. Today we'll just be looking at the first two. So let's think about what erosion is. We talked about how weathering is breaking down sediments into smaller pieces. When we pick up those sediments and move them to a new location, that's erosion. So it's any type of surface process like flowing water, the wind blowing, that removes soil and rock from that one location and transport it to another where it's deposited. So moving water erosion, if you start off with running water, you're going to get small channels. These small channels are called rills. When the rills get larger, they form gullies, and that's when a rill becomes deep, a little bit wider, and you can see a little more sediment has been moved. And then when we look at sediments removed by streams and rivers, we can get features as large as canyons. And you can see in this picture here of the Grand Canyon. So all of that was formed when sediments were picked up and carried to a new location. Now those sediments are going to be dropped off in a new location. So a delta is when a river deposits those sediments in the mouth of a bay or a gulf. This picture here on the right is the Mississippi Delta. This one is the delta at the mouth of the Nile River, but you can see they all have that triangular shape. An alluvial fan also has that triangular shape, but it usually forms in a mountain valley where water has carried sediments down through a narrow valley, and then they are deposited at the bottom. Wave erosion is another type of erosion by moving water. Here you see some features that have been carved on rocky coastlines like we see on the west coast. We have sea caves. When sea caves cut all the way through a cliff, we get sea arches. These are called sea stacks. That's when the top of a sea arch collapses and leaves just the stack. But it's that constant crashing of the waves against the rock that carries those sediments away and leaves these features behind. On sandy coastlines, we also see wave erosion, where the waves are going to pick up the grains of sand and carry them off. Here you can see how erosion has occurred through a barrier island and has cut open and created an inlet. And here you can see how sand has washed away, which has caused this house to collapse. Now there are things that we can do to control beach erosion. One of the things we can do is to build seawalls, and that's going to protect any of the property behind it. But there are some issues with seawalls. As you can see here, there is a beach and the seawall is built behind it, but over time, as that sand gets carried away, you end up with no beach and just the wall, as you can see in this top picture here. Sandbags are another way to protect property similar to seawalls, but the same thing happens. That sand in front of it is going to get carried away and only leave the sandbags for protection. There are structures that we can build to help protect the sand from washing away. They're called groins or jetties. And you can see in this top picture here, the jetties are built perpendicular to the shoreline. And as the water moves, the longshore current is moving in this picture from left to right. The sand gets deposited and blocked from moving down the beach. Now what happens is that causes the beach behind the groin to narrow. And so as you can see in this picture here at the bottom, when you build one, you have to keep building them down the beach, or else you're going to end up with one area of the beach is very wide and the rest is very narrow. Breakwaters are built perpendicular to the, built parallel to the beach, so the opposite of the groins, and you can see what they do is to protect the sand behind it from being washed away. A lot of times you'll see these in marinas, you'll see them to protect harbors. Here's one on a large scale, but the sediment tends to build up behind the breakwaters, and the water in this one you can see how much more shallow it is than the sea beyond the breakwater. When sand is deposited on a beach, the color of the beach depends on the source of the sediment. This picture is of a green sand beach. This is in Hawaii, and it comes from olivine, which is this green colored rock. Here's a black sand beach that comes from volcanic rock. This one is also in Hawaii. It could come from obsidian, basalt, some sort of dark volcanic rock. This is a white sand beach. It's white because it comes from limestone. Remember, limestone is the rock that's formed on coral reefs. Barrier islands are another feature that formed from wave deposition. This is a satellite picture of the North Carolina coast, and you can see our barrier islands. Now, ocean currents are constantly picking up sand and carrying it away. And so these barrier islands are constantly migrating or moving. And you can see from all of these pictures here how the sand is constantly carried. In this one, the island has actually moved westward. At one time, these two islands were connected, and this one has migrated in the opposite direction. If the longshore current causes the ocean to move in one direction or another, as if the waves are hitting at an angle, as they wash up on the shore, they're going to deposit sand sediments, and the backwash is going to pull those sediments back into the water. So what happens is these grains end up moving up and down the beach in a zigzag pattern. So that causes the island to grow longer on one end, shorter on the other, which is why they're constantly migrating. Alright, so switching gears and moving to wind erosion. We usually see wind erosion in deserts and coastal areas, and the difference between wind and running water is the wind can actually take these sediments and cause them to move uphill. In a desert, we see a type of erosion called deflation. The wind is going to take away the surface particles, those that are small enough to be carried away. And as those smaller particles are carried away, it leaves a concentration of the larger pebbles behind. And so eventually what we have are these pebbles without the smaller grains, and we call that desert pavement. And you can see here in the cutout on the right what that would look like up close. When wind carries those sediments away, it can cause other surfaces to be sandblasted, which creates some interesting erosional features. That process is called abrasion. During the Dust Bowl, back in the 20s, there was a drought in the Midwest, and due to poor farming practices, which mainly dealt with removing the vegetation, so then you had no root systems or anything to bind the soil in place, and combining with the dryness of the soil, most of the sediment was carried away by wind. So that took away all of that fertile topsoil, so then the crops could not be planted in the following season. When the sediments are deposited, they're carried by wind. One of the features that can form are sand dunes. Now, sand dunes are not only limited to the beach. We see them in deserts. This picture right here on the right are the Great Sand Dunes. This is, I believe they're in Colorado. But what you see are just sediments that are carried by the wind. If you look in this picture, the sand moves uphill, because remember, wind can move sediments uphill, and the side that has the more gentle slope is where the wind is coming from. And then you can see it slumps down with a steeper slope on the backside. Loess is another type of wind depositional feature. It comes from silt-sized deposits. Remember, silt is smaller than sand, and it can form silt dunes, and it's pronounced loess. We see a lot of these in the Midwestern states like Illinois, Iowa, South Dakota, Kansas. It tends to be very fertile soil. This picture here at the bottom are loess dunes that are in Iowa. And that's it for our erosional features today. Tomorrow we'll take a look at ice and gravity.